So now, I was so excited to tell this story about the Deutschland. Am I saying it? Did I get it?
Deutschland.
Deutschland. Okay, so bear with me because maybe it's just the way I speak it, And it's a great story, and it kind of took on a little bit of a mind of its own because the more I researched, the more I needed to dig for this answer or that answer, and it was pretty interesting. So I'm going to start with from the beginning. So my great uncle Eugene Duzan came to the United States with my great grandfather Hildever Lawrence. And upon arriving here, they're immigrants and looking for work, but having a good, strong connection to the water. So a lot of us came from the Caribbean, and we landed here in New London, Connecticut because of the river and being next to other people, our cousins and relatives, aunts, grandparents. And when they arrived, they got jobs with the dredging company, T.A. Scott. And from there, they worked a good while, being deckhands or whatever. But my great grandfather, he was like a person on the water also. He would have a lot of ships in the same thing as what Louis did, taking provisions all the way up and down the islands. And I think once he started having children, he needed something a little bit more. So they came here to the United States, settled in Noank, and then, it goes on from there. So in 1914 and 1915, Germany started to do some research on this U-boat, a merchant U-boat, and what they wanted was to be able to go to different parts of the world, pick up what they wanted, such supplies, and bring it back to Germany, because really, right there, they were trying to build their economic empire. And they needed something like a U-boat, which is a vessel that could submerge underwater and then come up when it needs to. And this was an important thing because it was during the war, World War I. And England had put an embargo on a lot of the ships going into Germany. They were a blockade. Going into Germany, and they needed some way to continue to get their supplies. So they were designing these U-boats for about a year and a half. And then into 1916, the beginning of 1916, they came up with a nice design that was working, and it had a double hull. It was quite big. I didn't really take down the measurements to give you that, but it was able to hold a lot of supplies to go over and back with their diesel without refueling, which I thought was pretty impressive. So here Germany now is ready to go. They've approved this design. It's on the mark. They're building it. And they're going forward. So, now early 1916, the U-boat Deutschland and the Bremen were going through sea trials. They wanted to make sure that it was airtight, that no water was going to leak in, that they were going to be able to, manage them. Whatever the sea trials are, I'm not really Navy savvy on that information. But anyways, the sea trials went forward. So within a few months, They were approved for the sea trials by April. By June, it was launched, and by July, he was heading to Maryland. This Captain Paul Coney. And they were training him while they were building these U-boats. So really, he only had maybe a couple of months to learn how to drive this submersible and surface U-boat merchant U-boat, and it was I think it was just too much information too soon for him to say, I'm gonna sail this vessel across the ocean with a crew. And but anyways, we'll get to that. So he heads out that day in July to head to Baltimore, Maryland. And there are things that you find once you set sail, or because the sea trials will give you one thing, but when you're going and going and going for that many days, things happen. There were slight leaks. Okay, the boat was rocking like crazy, that the crew, if you weren't up on deck when it was sailing, were green when they were underneath inside the cabin. They were like totally like sick. It was terrible. But he didn't want to hear what their complaints were. He was doing it his way, and that was that. So they really had no means of going up against him, because he was the captain and that was how it was going to be. So this was the way they made it to Maryland. But there were English ships throughout the ocean that were, basically in the war, and they were taking down ships, and there were plenty of times when he couldn't see what the flag was on the vessel coming too close to them, where he'd yell, dive, 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 and all of a sudden the whole crew would have to be in a dive mode just to get away from the vessel he thinks might have been an enemy vessel. So he gets to Maryland, and he doesn't allow, he asks for the entry to this port, but he doesn't want them to come on his ship. One, because it's a little bit wet. There's the bottom of the floor is wet, and I think they have to come in and inspect your vessel, make sure you don't have, whatever items. And he didn't want them to see that it was wet. So he refused to let the harbor master come onto his ship and check it out. So he goes out to he goes over to the two harbor masters, and he tells them, oh, you don't need to check my boat. We're not, let me see, what's the word? We're not making, patent infringements. They were looking to see if this U-boat had any of the United States patents that we were using on our submarines. And he says, oh no, this little vessel, we wouldn't have that here. And so he goes on to charm them and saying, in a few months, Germany and America, we're going to be a team of transporting our goods to one place to the next, and you can be in on it. He was almost bribing the harbor masters at the time. But they say he was so charming that he got away with it most often. So there was a lot of other things they called lies, espionage, and the request for nobody to view his U-boat in the harbor. So they always had it covered with some type of screen or a bigger vessel on one side or the other, because he wanted to keep it as private as he can. But If it was a woman coming to call on him, he would allow it. He wanted the women to come because they would sweeten their husbands to say, oh, this Captain Koenig is such a nice person. And he wanted to introduce a good relationship with Baltimore, New York, Connecticut, and so on. And so there were, they loaded up the cargo with black stevedores, you said it was. Stevedores. And we were like, well, why black stevedores? And this was in the book. So I said, I have to go find out. Wouldn't you know, they wanted to have black stevedores because, one, they felt they were stronger people to move the cargo. They wouldn't be interested in looking closer into the boxes of the cargo, you know. And come to find out, one of these black stevedores was a spy for England. And he did uncover that the blocks of silver that they were loading was, he scraped it off with his pocket knife. It was bars of gold. Bars of gold. I was like, oh my God. So this Captain Koenig, he was a little shaky on the backside, you know? So here's the thing. He arrived into Baltimore. He was trying to be like the face for this new enterprise of America and German exchange of goods. And he was doing pretty good, but some people, like reporters, they weren't buying it. So he loaded the cargo 2 weeks before he left. And what we suspect, or the book suspect, was that he was trying to, I need a part for this. Oh, I need a part for that. And he was literally getting parts for his submersible to go back to Germany so that Germany would copy these American-made parts, because the metals, the stuff, the things we used here in the United States was better. The diesel fuel was better, so he could have made a round trip from Germany to America, back to Germany on his tank of diesel, but he would fill up again in America because the American diesel was better. So he was a little bit on the shyster side, and we had to go with that. And you'll find out that's exactly the kind of person the Germans wanted in that position, you know? So here's the hoopla. Hoopla, hoopla, hoopla. He comes into New London Port, right? And coming across, I should tell you, he gets home to Germany, stays a while, and now here it is October, and he's heading back to America. And he's going with his crew, but there's more leaks. They're greener than ever. And the anchor starts hitting the side of the submersible. The anchor is hitting the side of the submersible, and what do you think? It's denting almost a hole in the side, and he's like, fix it as fast as you can. So of course they had to stop like sitting ducks in the ocean while his crew fixed this hanging anchor and secure it so that by the time they got in, it wouldn't be a big hole in the side of his hull. And so they fix it, and he comes into New London Port. And wouldn't you know, I suspect he wasn't the best captain on the water. He comes into the port, and he's cutting it too close. He's like, it was a wrecking ship, a wrecking vessel, the Atlantic, going out. Oh, I should say not wrecking, a dredging ship is going out to sea, out of the mouth of the Thames River. He's coming in, but he's cutting it too close, and the wrecker, can't read the lights on his on the submersible, and they're like, ah! They're like cutting it close, they're cutting it close like this, and they just make it past each other. Oh. Whew. Can you believe that? Yeah. The guy on the wrecking, the captain of the wrecking, he was like, dredging. He was like, who is that? And he knew, one, it wasn't an American ship. Two, he knew that the vessel was too big, way bigger than what we normally had, and it was very low in the sea, in the river. And then he knew. He said, it's the Deutschland. And man, he was mad. And then here is Captain Conan back on his vessel, like this. He's now knowing he almost just caused another accident on the seas. So he creeps in, comes down the pier, and they dock him where there's a huge, they call it the Hellenic or something like that. It's a huge ship. And this is the ship where the German crew will sleep while this vessel, the U-boat Deutschland, is in our port. And that it's so big that it hides the U-boat, the Deutschland. And then he brings a screen around to cover the other side, so there's nobody getting an image of this vessel, okay? Even though he's here to make like a nice partnership with now New London in Germany and so on, they just may not be buying it. So there's people over in Groton that are, like I think they said they rented apartments high up in the homes over in Groton, trying to see over. One reporter was up in a tree most times to try to look down into it. But the way they had it set up, we really couldn't see the vessel at all. But at first, he was trying to figure out, what can I do to have these New Londoners welcome me? And the German Americans, immigrants here in New London, said, well, we'll throw a party. And they had a huge party, more like a social meet and greet, which they said it was on the municipal building on State Street. And it like thousands of people showed up to shake Captain Conan's hand. One, because of he's now commuting or sailing here in a submersible. And a submersible at that time was pretty cool. So everybody wanted to meet the captain, shake his hand, and enjoy the company of saying I went down to the state's town and saw this thing happening. So this was going on for hours and hours. There was such a large crowd that they brought the police just to patrol the crowds and make sure that they kept them back at an easy flow of people. But that night, the real party began. A banquet you wouldn't believe. They were serving up everything, but he was a little bit tardy because there were so many people he still had to meet and greet over in the municipal building. But this banquet was at the Crocker House, no less, with, you wouldn't believe, the lavish decorations of German flags and American flags and roses and ferns and carnations. It was just so beautifully decorated that you would think the King of Prussia himself was there, So they had this beautiful 5-course meal, and this day was in the newspaper, and they told you what the menu was and everything. And I thought, my goodness, I really enjoyed that part because I'm a flower person. And Fisher Flores, can you believe that? Fisher Flores, he's still here up on Broad Street. He was his family was the ones who did the flowers. I was like, this is pretty cool. So Captain Koenig now goes over to the banquet, and he's shaking all the hands of all the mayor of New London, the master of the pier, and all these people. And after this, everybody's shaking hands, they go and sit down. There's a master of ceremonies who's gonna conduct the whole night show. And once that started, the band kicked up, they had an orchestra playing, and they were given lavish gifts. Now, the German-American population, the immigrants here, really were happy to see this vessel coming into New London. And so the crew, 33-member crew of the U-boat Deutschland, were given fountain pens with a ring of gold on each fountain pens and their initials. They were given a silver matchbox with their names engraved in it from Perry and Stone. You remember that jeweler, right? And then the captain himself was given a gold stopwatch. It was just really beautiful, and a pocket watch. And so the night went on, dancing and celebrating, and this is what he wanted. He wanted the community of New London to feel like we want the German exchange to come here and have all these beautiful things transporting here and there. And when I say fit for a king, Captain Koenig, Koenig means king in German. So it was quite interesting that they used that as the phrase in the book. So as we go on, I just went through that part of it, and it was, the band played on. So here's the story of my uncle Eugene, how he's involved here. My uncle Eugene was working one day down at the pier, and a captain comes in of this, an auxiliary fishing boat, and his propeller is wrapped tight with a rope, and he can't move this way or that way. He's being pulled into the pier because he's like stuck in the water. So he comes and he's looking for T.A. Scott, the officer of T.A. Scott, and he says, I need somebody, I need a diver. And Scott says, all my divers are out of town, they're doing another job. But my uncle Eugene heard this conversation, and he said, I go down. And Scott looked at him and he says, how are you gonna go down? You have no diving gear. He said, I don't need no diving gear, I go down. And the captain says, well, how much are you gonna charge? And Eugene stopped for a minute and he said, I'll charge you $2. And the captain says, I can do $2, go. And the man, Eugene, goes into the back shed, he takes off his clothes except for his overalls, and he dives into the water without a splash. Just like that. And he goes down, and he's fiddling with this rope, and he's fiddling with this rope. Try to hold your breath that long. And they're getting scared. Oh no, this guy is drunk. And he comes up for air, and he climbs up, hoists himself onto the deck of the pier, and he's resting, he's catching his breath. He said, T loose yet? And then he gets his breath and he dives back in the water. Down he goes. And it's a long time, and it's a long time. And then he comes back up. He said, the rope is free. You're good to go. And we were so, this is a nice story that we have about my Uncle Eugene. But he was able to free that rope, and the captain of the vessel paid him the $2 and was on his way down the Thames River and out to Long Island Sound. So Eugene was a good diver and a great deckhand, and I think the T.A. Scott was happy to have him as one of his employees. So, on the night of November 17th, the Deutschland was leaving early in the morning. It had the tug T.A. Scott Jr. in front, then the submersible, and then behind was the tug Cassie. And they were going out, and it was a beautiful moonlit night. And the water was calm, and there was a slight breeze in the air. And they were going down the river. And everything was like, oh, we're not going to eat breakfast. So the cook didn't have to cook anything, but he was making a nice pot of coffee. And so was the crew on the Deutschland. They were brewing some coffee too. And they were going to get the cigars going, you know what I mean? So they go on, and they're heading down, and everything seems like a normal day. It's just that the only thing is, it's dark, it's night. I would imagine vessels leave in the day, so you can see what you're doing. A light on your bow is basically a light on your bow, but the sunlight is a big difference. So they're going down the river, and they're coming into the race. And the race is the conversion of Long Island Sound, the Thames River, and Block Island Sound. So the water is churning and churning up, and it's churning up, and here comes the point where they're going to allow the submarine to go on into the open ocean, and the two tugs would be turning around to come back into the river. And that's not what happens. The water is churning. It might be the high tide of it, and it's churning, and it stops the T.A. Scott right in its path. It can't go forward. It's stuck in this kind of, it's stuck by the water going every which way. And then here comes the Deutschland, traveling way too fast, maybe 8-10 knots an hour. It's going way too fast for being close to this T.A. Scott, the tug. And within minutes, just T-bones this tug right at the middle of the vessel. And now, I gotta tell you that Captain Hinch, one of the, he was an employee of the Eastern Forwarding Company who was gathering the goods, the cargo from around the area for the Deutschland to load. So he was like the person who Captain Koenig went to get the cargo. And he was on the tug that night on the T.A. Scott. But he was on the bow of he was on the, what do you call that? He was on the deck or the bridge of the boat. And when he turned and he looked behind him, and to see the nose of the Deutschland coming right from him, he was thrown right off the deck of the boat into the churning waters. And he had a sweater on. It's November now today, honey. I came with just my shirt on. I didn't even have a coat. But maybe back then it was a whole lot colder. He had a warm sweater and one of those clothes for the boat. Isn't there a word for that? A parka. He was dressed warm. And what happens was, he gets thrown overboard, and air goes in underneath his jacket, this heavy jacket, and he floats. And here this is a big, big guy, and he's floating, but he can't swim. How are you going to be in this industry and you don't know how to swim? Doesn't make any sense. So he's floundering and he's floundering, but here comes the Cassie up about a half a mile back, okay? The Cassie is now the second tug, and they're coming up because he sees the lights come together, and the Deutschland, the Captain Koenig, hit the alarm, meaning collision. He hit the collision alarm that he said, bear to the right and starboard, he said starboard. And he was trying to turn that submersible as good as he can to not hit the tug, but it's too late. And so here comes the Cassie, full speed ahead to come up. And the superintendent, his name is Max. His name right now is Albert Mix. And he says to his crew on the carry, begin to lower the rescue vessel. So he's going down to, they're putting the boat lower as they're getting closer. And wouldn't you know, just as they get there, they start the searchlight. And the searchlight gets to hit right where Captain Hinch is floundering. And the boat gets in the water, gets to him. They throw him a life preserver ring, and he's now really exhausted because these garments are now holding him down or weighing him down. He grabs a hold of that ring, and they pull him in, but you have to imagine, he's a large person, he's soaking wet. It's dark, and they've got to get him in that boat, and they do. They save his life. For somebody who doesn't swim, he would have been, if they were any farther back, he knew, and he says that in the research that I found, he would have been gone with the crew. When I was reading this, oh my goodness, I was like, page after page, I was like, oh my God. It was great. So I'm not quite done yet. So I just want to read to you the list of the people who died that day, which it was really pretty sad. And I think had Captain Conan been a better captain, maybe it wouldn't have happened. You know, I just think he was not qualified for the job. But the people who were killed on the tugboat T.A. Scott was Captain John Gurney. He left behind a wife and several children. Engineer William Canton, he had a wife and children as well. The fireman Edward Stone, he was single. The cook Clarence Davison, he was single. And deckhand Eugene Duzan, he was single. Now of these five men, all of them except for Eugene lived in New London. So this was such a close community that this hurt to the core the loss of all these people who have been working with T.A. Scott Company probably most of their whole lives. And Eugene was an expert diver and swimmer. We know that. When he lived in the West Indies, he dove most of his days for conchs and pearls. And it was the opinion of the people who he worked with that had he not been trying to get back into the vessel to warn the other, his crewmen, that he might have been able to be still alive live through that. But it wasn't to be. So I will say the T.A. Scott Company brought a suit against the U-boat Deutschland, and they wanted to sue them for the lives lost of all those men, for the recovery of their boat, the tugboat, and for just, just for the sake of the peace of mind of it. And they were suing them for $175,000, and they put up this bond. The German Eastern Forwarding Company put up the bond for the Deutschland, and within hours, a local bank received a deposit of $500,000 from the Eastern Forwarding Company, who had interest in the shipping operations of the Deutschland. So there was a lot of ties and mystery and espionage behind all this. And in one swoop, Captain Koenig has destroyed that possibility. I put this part together, so I will read it to you. He had plenty of flaws besides they thought he's so charming. He was plucked from the crew of captains who were German, and what his job was excuse me. He was the captain or the skipper of passenger ships for luxury liner for the wealthy to take vacations through Europe. That was his job before they plopped him over here doing this on the U-boats. So believe me, I don't think he was happy, but in his personality, his attributes were he was resourceful, he functioned well under pressure, and he followed orders without question. So when they checked all these boxes off, he was one of the people who put just into that. He met his wife on one of these luxury cruises, and they married, and she was from England. So he also spoke fluent English. Another thing that they needed to have with putting somebody in that position. And they had 3 sons over the years. And the thing I want to tell you is the cargo, wherever he went, there was always something just not right. The cargo was questionable in Baltimore because it wasn't bars of silver, it was bars of gold. And the spy was sending information back to England. They already knew how to do all that back then, which is beyond, He also, this U-boat concealed from public view. That was another thing. Why are you hiding it if you're not under suspicion of something? There was a big brawl here when they came into Bank Street. When they came into New London, they had a big brawl here with his crew and probably our Navy crew too, And the rumors of espionage. And according to the book, there was plenty of spying going on, and they were getting information back and forth to England. So 3 things happened with Captain Koenig. Okay, he collided on his maiden voyage in Germany with another vessel before he even got out to the ocean, going to Baltimore. He nearly hit the other wrecking or dredging vessel going out when he was coming into New London, and that other vessel, the Atlantic, was going out. He nearly collided with that vessel. And then the third one, of course, is when he T-boned the tug T.A. Scott and killed the crew. And wrapping up, by February 1917, the merchant U-boat program between Germany and America was scrapped. The U-boats were converted to warships equipped with torpedo launches and machine guns on both sides of the hull. The 20 tons of cargo was removed from the Eastern Forwarding Company and moved to a warehouse in Hoboken, New York.
New Jersey.
It's New Jersey?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was Hoboken, New York. I put that there. I'll correct it. Well, then I get to New York. But I will tell you, the last thing, Captain Hinch, the guy who was saved, thrown from the T.A. Scott tug, he disappeared. They couldn't find where he escaped to because he knew he was gonna be in a lot of trouble. So I want to thank you all for listening to my story today. This was great. I enjoyed all the research and it was fun. And thank you.